everyone. Thank you for tuning in and welcome to the Martini. My name is Gus and I'm Erie Rental's Director of Business Development for North America. And I've been with the Erie family now for over 17 years and honored to be your host today. As a friendly reminder, please send us your questions via the Q&A tab and we'll get to as many of those as possible during the course of the show today. We are very fortunate to have with us the amazing Neville Kidd. Neville Kidd ASC is an Emmy and BAFTA award-winning director of photography and a member of the American Society of Cinematographers. He has also been nominated for the ASC Awards for his work in episodic television and won the Festroia Best Cinematography Award for the feature Solid Air. Over the last decade, Neville has lensed several high-profile episodic projects for the BBC, Netflix, and Apple TV. These projects include Doctor Who, Outlander, Sherlock, Altered Carbon, Amazing Stories, and Umbrella Academy, which is currently our favorite. Welcome, Neville, and thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
No, a pleasure to be here.
So give us a little background. How did you get sucked into the film circus as it is?
Yeah, no, I got sucked in by, as a kid, my grandfather was a member of a cine club, and he used to show us old Super 8s when we were growing up, and I just loved it, and I got the bug. And when I was a kid, I was going to the cinema to see Jason and the Argonauts and James Bond, and I just thought, I have to work in this. This is a dream job. I've got to make it. So I started taking a lot of photographs, and I kind of worked my way into film school, and I tried to get into the film industry coming out of film school, but it was just at the point where the UK industry was going through a little blip, and I struggled to get into the union programs, and they cancelled them. And I ended up working for the BBC in Scotland. And that was fantastic to get a kind of broad range of doing all kinds of work. And the great thing in Scotland, it's a little cottage industry. So you've got to do a little bit of everything. So you can't just be a drama DP or a commercials. You've got to be able to do all sort of master of everything. And I kind of spread my talents across documentaries, commercials, dramas, always keeping my kind of foot in the drama camp.
Hmm. And was it always about the camera, or when did you start really messing with light?
I think it was about the camera to begin with, definitely. And then I started to mess with light when I was doing, ironically, when I was doing BBC News, I started testing all my lighting on people. And I think I was taking too long and lighting people very lovingly, which is not the normal for news. And then I kind of applied that into my documentary work. And I think that's how I got the bridge between, documentary and narrative, is I could add a kind of handheld documentary approach to narrative work because I could light. I had always been doing short films as I was going along.
Right. And it's funny that you mentioned Jason and the Argonauts, because I think that for everybody, at least our generation, that's the one, like, visual effects wise, is just always had an impact, I think.
Yeah, no, I can still see it if I shut my eyes. The fight sequences with the skeletons.
Yeah, it's so cool. And there's something just, so special about the handcrafted, just look of those films.
Yeah, no, completely.
It's interesting trying to show that to our children now, and they're like, what?
Yeah, they just don't want to know. We were showing the kids the birds, and they were just like going, what? Because I think we forgave all the strings and we didn't see them. Whereas now the kids, they see everything.
Yep. And how about, so talk about more about the inspirations, were there other art forms and other things that you were really?
Yeah, I was brought up, my parents were great. They always took me to the museums and everything. So I think, I had a Dutch kind of aunt and uncle, and I spent a lot of time, we were in Amsterdam going to the museums. And I was always blown away by the kind of photorealism of the Dutch masters. And I think that's something that's always kind of stayed with me. And I kind of, doing Outlander was a great way to kind of get all that kind of Caravaggio and Vermeers and Rembrandts kind of out my system. And it's a great kind of base to have, that kind of photorealism.
Yeah. And were there any mentors for you?
No, there was a great guy, David Peets, who growing up, he was a fantastic documentary filmmaker. And he just he took me under my wing a little bit. And he taught me just to keep the camera moving. And I think of the one thing I've learned is to keep the camera moving and to keep the frame moving. Do you know what I mean? Always have perspective or have somewhere for the eye to go. So not necessarily, I do love my kind of big wide statics, but I think the eye's got to have somewhere to go. So I think I kind of learned that kind of keeping people kind of visually stimulated.
Yeah, I always find there's like two sides to that camp, you know, one that's like, yes, always move the camera, keep the energy going, and others that are like, don't move the camera unless there's a reason for it.
Yeah, and I think you can combine the two by having the composition. You know, your eye is moving all the time. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the way I think we did Umbrella Academy, was always a kind of perspective kind of going off. You know, that was very much a kind of deliberate style thing that we took from kind of Wes Anderson, kind of Kubrick, and all that kind of framing.
So you spoke about having the transition from the cottage industry of, you know, Scotland locally for you, and then down into London and the BBC, but then moving overseas and doing more projects in North America. How was that transition?
Yeah, it was, I was very fortunate I was doing, Taggart was the local kind of police show that everybody did here. It's fantastic. And I think it was one of the longest running cop dramas in the world. And Marcus Wilson, who'd done Life on Mars, he'd come up to Scotland to work on Taggart, and he was going on to do Doctor Who. So when he was moving to Doctor Who, I was saying, we were in the grade, and I was like, what are you doing next? And he was, well, I'm going on to do Doctor Who. And I was like, oh my God, you're doing Doctor Who? I would do that for free. Because we all, as kids, we grew up hiding behind the sofa. It was the show that everybody loved. And it's kind of like a national institution here. And then 6 months later, he phoned me up and said, you still do it for free? But no, joking. He said, look, I can get you in to meet Nick Curran. And we got on like a house on fire. And that's when I came on to do Doctor Who. Started working with Stephen Moffat. And I did about 6 Doctor Who's, including the 50th anniversary feature, which was on 3D, which was fantastic. And that was a fantastic skill to learn. And even while we were filming it, the 3D guys were like, this is probably the last time you'll do 3D for real in camera, because it's all going to be software based. It's all going to be done in post after this. So it was brilliant to have the 3D rigs, to have the 2 cameras lined up with the mirror system. And it was fantastic fun.
My goodness. I think that's just got to be the most challenging for a cinematographer.
Yeah, no, totally. And Joe Russell, who's one of our, you know, I think he's one of the best ops in the UK, if not the world. He was doing some of it handheld, and the weight of it was just insane, you know. I think it's the heaviest rig I've ever had. I had to do a shot on it, and I think I was crying after about 15 seconds having this rig on. Absolutely huge. But the success of that, Stephen Moffat gave, you know, Sherlock to Nick Curran, and it got me on, which was the best looking show in TV at that time, you know, in the UK. That was the one, as a DP, you wanted to get on it, and you wanted to do your version of Sherlock. And we did His Last Vow together, and luckily, you know, it won me an Emmy. And I think that opened the doors to, you know, North America, because Sherlock was such a big success. You know, suddenly people were watching and aware of it. And that opened the doors to Outlander, working with Ron Moore, and then on to Altered Carbon.
So it's a combination not only of, you know, the subject and what you are bringing to the table, but also the relationships you've built with the filmmakers. And that's
yeah, and I think it's that, and I think it's that collaboration. I think DPs, it's our job to collaborate with the directors in production. And I think I enjoy that side of it. I enjoy the collaboration. I love kind of immersing myself into the project I'm doing. And I think it's that kind of honest sort of storytelling that you can tell when a show is got phenomenal collaboration, because it all comes together on the screen, when something just, it's going nowhere. And it's just sort of generic. You know, it's made by the committee, and it doesn't have that kind of personal touch to it.
Made by committee.
Yeah, that's a dangerous. Yeah.
I, you know, as you and I were talking a little bit about yesterday, you know, I think there is a fear that it's kind of heading in that direction, and we have to somehow keep our voices heard as to
and I think
the diversity in that.
Yeah, and I think it's the same. You know, it's from the showrunners. The showrunners have got to have their vision, and I think they've got to gather their team and bring in the team that they think are going to do the job for them.
Mm.
And I kind of enjoy that trust, you know, when you come in and they're essentially they're giving you their baby to kind of teach and grow up, teach them to see and behave.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting what we've seen in the industry over the last couple of years of, you know, episodic television, you know, in a way, really feeling like it's starting to overtake, you know, features in just the craftsmanship and, you know, the screenwriting and everything that's being put into it. And I think it's an amazing platform that really has opened up and broken out. And you've made a real commitment to that. And I think that's, you know, and the stuff that you do is really cool. Do you still have a desire to go out and shoot features at this point?
Yeah, no, I definitely have a desire to do features. And I think to do a feature that's very personal to somebody would be phenomenal. I'd love to sort of, that's the one thing I feel I'm missing, is a very personal story that you can truly immerse yourself in and visually kind of, blow the audience away with your interpretation of it.
Hmm. Yeah. It's, you know, going back to the conversation of, you know, being made by committee or, you know, being able to watch things based on, you know, algorithms. You know, it's at what point are we no longer, you know, challenged, you know, or we're not, you know, given something that completely is, we don't understand it the first time and we go back and we watch it again and say, oh, that's what's going on. And, you know, it's the fear to experiment and break out and try something new. It may not be successful, but somebody sees it and gets inspired by it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think Sherlock was a great example of, it was just something different, you know, and that was the great joy of filming it, because you had to see the world the way Sherlock saw it. And I think that's fantastic. And you've got to take a risk with all the each episode. I think this is what streaming is. So many of the streamers are like little mini features. You know, you can actually, you've got the budget, you've got the time to pull off a longer story arc that's not just, you know, maybe done in sort of, you know, in 90 minutes or whatever.
Hmm. Early on, when you're pitching for a project, or you're even, you know, if you're in early prep on stuff, what do you use to communicate your ideas and your vision?
I use a lot of stills as a reference for what, you know, once I read the scripts, I can see it in my head. And it's one of those things that if I can't see it in my head, then it's not sort of ticking the boxes and it's not something I'm going to do. And then you've got your visual references, and I'll bring up a kind of lookbook of all the visual references that I've got to show the director, to show the showrunner. And then we'll do a pitch to the studio as well. And then from that moment, everybody's on the right path.
Hmm. Very cool. Do you keep these?
Yeah, no, I've got, there's a few, I mean, I should have brought some on board for you.
No, I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, I always do keep them. The pitch documents are fantastic.
Yeah, because I've heard some people, like, you know, give them away as a wrap gift or something like that to the, you know, to their whoever that may be, the director or their collaborator or whatnot. Sometimes.
Yeah,
wow,
yeah.
That seems so personal. It's like, wow.
Yeah, well, they're phenomenal kind of books in their own right. They're complete work of art.
Yeah, very nice. And so let's dive into some of the projects, because you shared some really cool stuff with us, and I think you know, looking at your work and some of the stuff that's inspired you, and you shared some really cool, you know, going back to you talking about visiting the museums in Amsterdam and looking at the Dutch painters, and then how that lighting inspired what you did on Outlander. And I think that's
I mean, the Night Watchman I was blown away with as a kid, and just the scale of it and the quality of it, and then Caravaggio is the next one I think coming up. You know, is stunning, and I think that's what blew me away when I was younger, and I wanted to kind of transfer that. That's why I wanted to be a filmmaker. I wanted to be able to create lights that felt 100% real, you know, in a studio environment. You know,
composition is really interesting too.
You know, and this is what I was doing, you know, on Outlander. You know, it was the same kind of feel where you could just look at it forever, you know. It just kind of sucks you in.
Oh,
and then
beautiful.
we go on to something that's slightly more dramatic. But and that's one thing on Outlander we're trying to do. Was we did a lot of this handheld to kind of go with the kind of very beautiful kind of 18th century kind of lighting to get the contrasts, to kind of make it, to get the feel of Scotland in the 18th century, what it was like, how cold and miserable it was, but then how phenomenal the castles must have been, with the light coming in and everything. And following it through the ages. And this was Bonnie Prince Charlie. So this was one of my favourite scenes, actually. So when they're trying to persuade the clans to kind of gather for, the Jacobite uprising. And I think I've definitely taken this from what I kind of learned as a child growing up. And I think that's why I say to a lot of people, just collect everything, collect all your stills, because I think it comes out at some point. You don't know when it's going to be used in the kind of visual bank.
Talk about your work with production designers, because I think that's also quite interesting too.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite stills of all time, by the way. And this is René Burry, and it's stunning because it's the first time I realized you could tell a story with lights. The guys on the rooftop, because they're backlit, you don't quite know have they been doing something bad? Are they aliens or whatever? And it suddenly opens the door of, okay, I get it. When I was like a teenager, and this kind of takes me into the kind of altered carbon world, and that relationship with the production designer was so close because we were basically building the altered carbon world sort of 4 months before we started filming it, and we had to get all the sets, all the windows, how we were going to do where we're going to do blue screens everywhere, where we're going to do translights, and you need that preparation. And I think it pays off with the production value of altered carbon, because we'd gone through everything. So we knew the VFX money would be spent on the big shots, and we didn't have to waste it in lots of tidy up detail. And this, growing up, was Bill Brandt was one of my favorite photographers. And he had he managed to capture that kind of 1960s, 1970s UK kind of, when Britain was going through a really hard time, kind of readjusting to mass unemployment, the shutdown of old industry. And growing up in Glasgow, I used to see all the buildings getting knocked down, the shipyards getting shut down, the coal mines and the towns outside getting shut down. And there was a lot of, you could feel the kind of the changing of the guard almost. And I think Bill Brandt was phenomenal at kind of capturing that. If I flip it this was Francis Bacon, again, one of my favorite photographs. Just Francis Bacon, painted these phenomenal paintings of the horror of Second World War. And then this captures what's going on in his head. And I think as an artist, it made me realize you can tell somebody's story. And as a stills photographer, Bill gets this phenomenal. And as a DP, we've got far more in our arsenal to kind of add to telling emotion, lighting, moving the camera, the lens choice, the camera choice. So I knew at this point I had to be a DP rather than a photographer, because this was everything in the stills, and I wanted to kind of go further. And then, this is another one in the north of England. And I think this is my memory of growing up. We were, my town was surrounded by iron foundries. I think there was like 8 of them. And the one near me used to make all the telephone boxes. And it's just a strong memory of all the smoke and all the pollution and all the chimneys. And then within sort of 10, 15 years, it's all, disappeared. And what happened to all the workers? And Scotland was going through a big change. I think the world was going through a big change. And this is exactly what Glasgow's going through. This is not Glasgow. I think this is probably sort of north of England, Newcastle or somewhere. But again, this is my memories of Glasgow. My dad used to take me to Glasgow to watch all the tenements getting knocked down. And it was phenomenal as a kid to see your city getting smashed and rebuilt in another guise. And unfortunately, they built sort of 1960s, 1970s skyscrapers, which are all getting knocked down again.
Exactly.
But it kind of took me into the, I think the next one is, oh yeah, here's the kids. This is just that kind of telling the story on a kind of close, wide shot, which we all kind of know, we all appreciate. I think this was early on, you realize you can get everything across. And I think this is why I kind of err towards, large formats, or slightly wider lenses coming in close. I think I enjoy this kind of personal connection you're getting with this kind of lens.
Yeah, it's amazing perspective.
And the same with this, it's the light, it's the low winter sun that we get in Scotland, where we are. You get that very low sunlight in winter. And again, it's just stunning. You've only got it for, an hour or so, but what you get in that time is phenomenal. But in in winter, we don't get the sun ever going that high. It stays fairly low. So it's actually a stunning time. It's a great location to make a film in the winter. Unfortunately, it's very cloudy most of the time. But if you got the sun, you'd be laughing.
Oh.
You'd be in your element. And then this is exactly what I remember. The tenements getting knocked down, the skyscrapers coming up, and I think when I was doing Altered Carbon, this was all definitely in the back of my mind. And I think it's combining the old and the new. I think that's one thing we were trying to do with Altered Carbon was we were layering time. These things have been built upon and added upon, and it wasn't just everything was 350 years in the future. And I think sometimes you can make a mistake of everything's brand new or everything's old and forget that everything's kind of in stages. And I think that's what I always try and take with my I kind of layer my work as well. I always try and let the camera show the eye, perspective and distance. And I think because your eye loves to roam, and I think that's why in Umbrella Academy, Altered Carbon, I just try to give distance all the time, and not let things go completely black. Just you've got a phenomenal camera to show everything. And this was a photograph that was taken during the Syrian civil war, which really kind of connected with me, just with the horror of what's been happening in the war. But, you can see the beauty of what used to be there. And I think it's quite frightening of how quickly it can all disappear. And we wanted this, I use this as a reference to number 5 in the Apocalypse, to kind of show that, he could, there was a luxury, there was a wealth, and it's all been gone. And I think it's nice. It's a nice contrast to show how horrific, kind of war actually is. And then this is going into Altered Carbon. This is our world that we created. And it was all built in the studio. And fantastic, Kerry Meyer made the most phenomenal sets that you could film forever. And this was outside. We did a kind of spinning shot, which is basically when he's realizing the time and all the changes that his sleeve has gone through when they changed themselves. We shot this on a spinning rig, about 1,000 frames, and slowed it right down. So I wanted a lot of fire, a lot of ash. So when it slowed down, everything just looked insane. It looked absolutely stunning. And they used it as the intro for every episode.
Yeah, beautiful. And
then just going into that kind of future noir was the kind of vibe that we were trying to get. And it was, and the great thing of, taking future noir was using, the film noir kind of style, but just introducing just the kind of the colors of your palette, and I think I enjoyed taking that kind of discovering the blues, the whites, the purples, the reds of the altered carbon world, which was just fantastic fun to do. And then combined with, Chris Connor's Poe, which is this fantastic hotel set they made, which was absolutely gorgeous.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and we used incredible. You would never know we used mold beams coming in through there, but the glass was so thick it kind of you can just make out the strength of them coming through. But and then into the next.
Yeah, and going back to my question about working with production designers, to ensure certain color palettes in a way, I guess would be the to go about that, and also texture. How deeply involved do you get in that?
Yeah, the color palettes is very important because we, sometimes you need a room to be darker, and you don't want everything to be painted white when you turn up filming. So you want to make sure the palettes are working with, your lighting, and all production designers are phenomenal for that. They completely, they're offering their palettes, and it's a complete. I love that kind of collaboration of colors, and then adding what my lights are going to be and what gels I'm going to use, and well, not gels anymore in the LED world, but what colors we're going to use. And I kind of love I love this frame within a frame kind of feel, and I love, your eye being taken into a kind of a corner, and then the next shot, the back of the head. I love taking the camera as a journey coming in and discovering. And this all worked a treat for kind of Joel's character as a kind of, as a noir detective.
And what I thought was interesting about this first season of Altered Carbon is you guys were the first episodic production to go to 65 millimeter digital format.
Yes.
And we were all like, wow, this is okay. Yeah, let's figure this out. Let's let's make this happen. And did you have any concerns about, doing this type of project with that increased resolution and the production design and everything? Did you
I think we were embracing, we were kind of wanting as much resolution as we could get for a world that's 350 years in the future. I think we were so used to using ARRIs, and then the 4K thing came along, and suddenly everybody was saying, oh, no, you can't have an ARRI anymore because, it's not 4K. So when we were doing Altered Carbon, the Alexa 65 was the camera we had to use to get 4K, and we were like, we're having it. We have to. This is going to be the best looking show on Netflix, and it has to be on the best looking camera. And Martin Ogren had a great idea of going 5K, and we used the lenses, Canon Cineprimes, which were fast lenses, which would replicate the 6.5K film gate. So we were basically cheating 6.5 with 5K because on less data, which kept production very happy. And this is going back to Umbrella Academy. This was one of our references for how we wanted that kind of richness of light, which is one of my favorite DPs is Chris Doyle, and then The Mood for Love is just a gorgeous film. I mean, you could watch it forever.
Yeah. If I had $1 for every time we mentioned this in Chris Doyle's work on the Martini, I think I'd be a rich man by now. It's coming up. It's great.
He's a very talented man.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
But this was a great. What I used. This is a fantastic artist called Richard Tushman, and he did these fantastic kind of sets, and the sets are models, and he took a photograph of the model and then added them into the model of the set. The set's only the size of, big enough for his cat to get in, as he says. And this was a great way to describe how we were going to make Umbrella Academy look. I wanted a slightly heightened world that didn't feel real, but was real. It was just 1 or 2 degrees off wasn't quite right. And in order to explain this to the studio and everything, I came up with these kind of visual references, which just said, it's real, but it's not real. And I think this was a kind of perfect way to kind of show the lighting we were going to have, and also with the Lexus 65, have that deep fall off of focus on wide shots.
Yeah, it's so cool. It feels like Alice Through the Looking Glass or something, you know, where you're just in a dream. Fantastic. It's so cool. Yeah.
And it's because it's just the oddness of it. And, you know, we're making a show where, you know, there's a speaking chimp, there's a man who's sort of 3/4 silverback gorilla. You know, you're in a kind of abstract world. So the world's got to be abstract. I think if it's too real, people, it's too kind of alien to each other.
Yeah.
And there's the guys, there's Richard Katz in this. I love that kind of reference. Just in case you didn't believe there were models, you know, this made me laugh. But and this was another reference I used for Amazing Stories. It's a fantastic photograph. And let me get her name. Is India Beale. And it's one of my favorite photographs. And it just, the more you look at it, the more you start to see. And I love that way of the photos just giving. It's giving you so much more than the first look. And I think when we were doing Amazing Stories, we wanted to kind of do the same with the cinematography. We wanted to kind of just hint at things that were about to happen, but you didn't quite know what was going to happen, and just keep giving the audience kind of little clues of what's kind of coming. And I find this is just a great example of just having a reference to show, you know, Richard Tushman was great for Umbrella Academy, and Dina Beale was phenomenal just to show everybody this is kind of the world we're going to be in. And then it was a kind of story of two girls trying to break out of their world in the athletic track, but with other things going on underlying as well. And it was great to film. We filmed it slightly like a Western. I wanted it to have that expanse and also contrast with the tight emotional shots, you know, in that kind of Sergio Leone kind of way where he has these big wide expanses all the time, but then cuts into really sort of detailed emotional moments before they're in the shootout, you know?
Yeah, it's so extreme. And it almost is jarring in a way, you know, every time.
Yeah, and I think it works well. And this was their world. This was, you know, we lit this world. We kind of created it all from nothing.
Wow.
And, you know, I just wanted to make it feel this is where they come from. This is under the motorway. They need to try and find a way out, and through their kind of running. And no spoilers, you know, they start to find their way out. And this was phenomenal. I've lost track of how many sky panels we had in here. We had sky panels all the way down. I mean, must have been like about 40, 50, 60 sky panels. And then I had like 18Ks at the very end, backlighting the pillars. And I put a street of sky panels, just say about 3 pillars down. I put like about 12 separate sky panels, and I had them all changing from white to red and orange, as if it's kind of like a traffic flow. And we kind of played about with it, and we got a lovely flow of traffic to mirror, you know, cars coming through. And it worked brilliantly. Felt alive. Felt like, you know, the world was carrying on around us, but you know, we'd created it all, you know. So this was one of my favorite locations in Atlanta. Amazing. And then just that lovely kind of large format on the, you know, fall off.
Wow. And for Amazing Stories, did you continue with, was this with the LF you said?
No, this was on the Venice.
Okay.
And what I did with the Venice was I kind of used its native 2500 ISO. Mm-hmm. And I thought it just gave it a little bit of texture, a little bit of something that wasn't, I felt for our, every story it needs its kind of, its medium. And I think we wanted a little bit of grit, a little bit of something that felt filmic. And the 2500 actually works remarkably well.
And you have go-to filtration that you use?
Yeah, so we used pearlescent filters. So I jumped between sort of black pearlescent and a normal pearlescent, depending on the show. But pearlescents are kind of a filtration of choice at the moment. But everything is different. You definitely choose the lenses for the job, you choose the cameras for the job, and the filtration for the job.
Yeah. And do you typically work with a DIT?
Yeah, and I love that collaboration and connection with just creating the palette. And I've been working a lot with, been fortunate to work with Joel Bogdanovich, and she's been fantastic. And Gautam Pinto on Umbrella Academy. And between the three of us, Gautam and I would kind of say, this is what we're thinking, and give it to Jill. And then Jill would give us, a masterpiece in return. She does a fantastic job. And this was when she dies, and she kind of comes back, and give me a spoiler. I wanted the shock of the world to be so alien and different that I shot it on a 360 camera. And we did it on Steadicam, and then we got VFX to get rid of the Steadicam post. So that's your 360. I think it's a Pro 360 camera, phenomenal quality, and it just gave us a feel that we were shooting it on a fisheye, but not a fisheye. I wanted something just to feel the world had completely kind of turned upside down and made no sense anymore. And this was visually my kind of way into her new world, and it worked a treat. And Brian Nordheim is a phenomenal Steadicam operator. And,
how do you light for that? I mean,
you can only. In fact, we used it in Altered Carbon for when he goes into the AI world, and we had a little remote control buggy that we put it on, and we drove it down the middle of the set, and we hid the whole crew. And then VFX had to paint out all our softboxes. But it worked absolutely brilliantly because you were in a different environment, and it just gave the audience the trigger that this is not normality anymore. We're in the strangest of places.
Yeah. So in that particular use on this, you were daytime exterior. Did you wait for where it was going to be more diffused? Or?
No, the problem was it was raining. So we had to wait for the rain to stop, Because you can guarantee whatever happens, will happen when you don't want it to happen. But we got it. I think we did 3 takes, and it worked fantastically well. And I love this kind of intimacy of the large format, where you can just separate the world. This is a very kind of emotional moment towards the end, and you can, the camera connects. I think it just the phenomenal work the actor's doing. It happily complements.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about large format is the dimensionality that it brings. Obviously when using, smaller formats or what, our normal Super 35 format, you can compress the image using telephoto lenses and whatnot, but there's a 2-dimensionality to it when you do that. But large format is somehow creates just a more 3-dimensionality kind of feel to it from what I've been hearing and seeing. So,
and I think it fits with the size of our TVs. I think because we've suddenly changed our viewing habits, we're suddenly watching everything on 55-inch plasmas, LED, OLED screens. And I think that's why I was aware that I was changing the way I was filming things, because I was aware that everybody was watching it on an insane screen. So you were giving them big, kind of glorious shots that they were just enjoying the production designers' kind of masterpieces. And I think that's what Altered Carbon Umbrella kind of works, because you were just enjoying the world and you were giving people the world, and they would believe it. They would sit and then kind of drool over it. And the large format cameras allowed you to do that.
Mm.
You know, and I think large format and the changing streaming kind of visual styles were all kind of growing together. I think it's fascinating how, and I think with the pandemic, it's going to reduce the amount of cinema time we're going to have. We're going to spend even more time. Probably our televisions will get even bigger, and our production values. I think what it does, it shows off. It's like watching programs now in the grading suite. I think my frustration when I first started off was you grade everything on this fantastic monitor, and then you go home to your mum and dad's and watch it on this terrible TV, and all the colors were orange, whatever. And I think what's happening now is people are starting to see the picture we're seeing in the grading suite. And I think that's only happened in the last 10 years. You know, that the quality of the televisions are now speaking to Netflix, speaking to the metadata is coming through, the 4K HDR settings are the settings that we gave it. You know, so people are seeing exactly what we intend them to see now. So it's phenomenal. And I think Ozark is a great example of that. They can make Ozark darker and gorgeous. And Ozark is a stunning show. I don't know if the broadcasters would have allowed it, would have been so happy 10 years ago, because people's TVs would be going, oh, I can't see, you know. And I think it's technology, streamers, cameras, I think we're all moving along together in a kind of almost like a nice harmony. And it's only going to make the experience better for the viewers at home.
Well, then I have to ask, where does it go from here? What do you think is the next?
I mean, me personally, I want you guys to make a 5:4 kind of like a sense of that big, because it's like, I love 5:4 photography. I love the plate photography. The plate photography is the dream. You look back at the photographs taken 150 years ago, and they're absolutely stunning. And they have a quality that you can't believe they were taken that long ago. And I think, for me, I would say make the sensor bigger. And to make an episode of, to make a feature film with a 5:4 plate digital sensor would be my dream. I think that would be the ultimate. And I almost feel like I should take a sabbatical and work out a way of doing it.
I was going to say, I would think, I mean, we've been so programmed to watch things or to shoot things or to tell stories a certain way. And now we're starting to break that mold, like you said, where people are watching them, vertically on their phone. And it's like, so to your point, if you were to now adjust to that and bring in larger sensors, which again, inherently are going to have other things, like if you were to move the panning speeds, you're going to get sort of different weird artifacts, with motion at large format, because that's what happens, obviously. And still, it's very unique and beautiful, but we would have to almost adjust our storytelling methods to the format.
And I think you would make something different. And I think thinking about it, what you want to do is shoot a large format on a if you had all the money in the world, on T22, and then basically take out your stop as required in posts. Do you know what I mean? It's like the camera. I've forgotten the name of the camera.
Yes.
That they were trying to develop.
Yeah.
Where they were layering it. And I think that's the future. If you find a way of being able to layer, going in another dimension, then we're telling stories in a different way, which would be phenomenal. And I think basically we've got so much content, we've got so much out there. People are screaming for new ideas, and I think that's the exciting thing about our industry right now. Is there's so much, people are willing to sort of look at and try. And in fact, I was chatting to, when I started off, trying to get people to view my reel was impossible, because it was a VHS tape. It was impossible to get anybody to sort of post it, to open the envelope, to even have it on their desk and then put it in the machine. Whereas now you can send somebody a link. And I think that's the brilliance of the internet, is people will just click just out of curiosity. And I think for up and coming DPs, they can send their reels, and people might just go, do you know what, I'll just have a little look. see what's on it. And I think it's the same with new projects. You can take risks because people just want to have a look. They just want to check it out.
As as this technology moves forward, and obviously there's been a lot of attention, a lot of discussion around virtual location photography, or these LED walls and panels that can create these locations on set. As a cinematographer, how do you keep your your style and your stamp on something like that that's being?
But I think you constantly combine it with what you're doing. I think that's the secret. It's funny, I was chatting about this recently on a project. I think you have your sets and you have the VR behind it. Maybe you don't do a green screen, or you can do like maybe a train sequence or whatever, or you can have, the worlds can change outside by being interactive with your sets, with your characters. I think it's probably a bit more difficult with just in a VR world, because you've got nowhere to hide. And I think you've got to choose your lens carefully. You've got to have a huge amount of computing power and a lot of dollars, and I think that's obviously going to come down in price. But I think in the meantime, we can all help each other. I think VR definitely integrates it into the sets, depending on how the story works. And then you get creative. Then you can find ways, especially in things like Umbrella Academy, where we can change the world. You're going into another dimension or whatever. I think VR would complement us enormously.
Yeah, because it's an interesting thing to think about now. The camera, the lighting, and the background, I guess, in a way, for lack of a better word, are all speaking to each other, and they're all in sync. Yeah. So as you move the camera, the background is adjusting, the lighting is adjusting.
No, and the thing is, you can do anything. I mean, that's the great thing, and I think it's at the stage where it's almost too much as well. I do a lot of consulting for gaming companies, for animations, for their and what they get upset about is there's no rules. They can do anything. They're like gods, but they need the rules. So I come in and say, well, look, you can only use these lenses because these are our lenses. You can only light it like the way I would light it. And I would put in cutters and everything. And then suddenly it starts to look like cinema. And they're like, it doesn't look like a comic book anymore. And I think that's because you give people restrictions. They can the world becomes more manageable in a kind of creative sense. So when you've got no limits, it's kind of hard to kind of know where to start. And I feel VR is no limits at the moment. And I think I think it's going to do the most phenomenal work, like The Mandalorian and all that kind of stuff. But it's going to be also used in a way where you can integrate it into your set and into characters and do all sorts, So I think it's going to change our industry, and for all the right reasons.
Yeah. It's really interesting, especially with COVID now. I think COVID's going to push that along even further, and faster, I guess.
And I think as long as you're all over, you check all the footage, where you can get unstuck is when you haven't checked something, and it's maybe somebody's changed the color or whatever, and you come on set and it's doing something you don't want it to do. I think it's for VR, you just got to make sure everything is checked, everything is what you've asked for, and you've checked it 100 times, and then there's no surprises.
On the topic of lenses, I do want to ask, do you have a tendency to kind of stick with a set of lenses as you go across, or do you prefer to test and
I think I
find
prefer
something that
to
fits the
test. I
product?
think every show has its lens, and every, it's like I was saying earlier, it's so subjective, and I think certain lenses scream out for you, and I enjoy the kind of testing process, and I think for season 3 of Umbrella, we'll go somewhere else with the way the lenses are, and I think you have fun because it just gives these little subtle changes which the viewer does pick up on.
Yeah. What's the most important characteristic of a lens?
For me, it has to be real. I think if it gets too digital, I start to kind of, the wall comes crumbling down. I think that's why, I'm a big fan of cooks. I think cooks are, always provide that kind of feel where it's a natural kind of very cinematic feel. And you find that kind of ideal. On season 2 of Umbrella, we used Supremes, Zeiss Supremes, and they were fantastic. They had a lovely kind of feel for the 1960s. And I think it's just everything, slots in.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I've had cinematographers that, I said, oh, you should take a look at this lens. Well, how many iris blades does it have? Yeah. That's the first question to ask.
Yeah.
If it's too little, don't want it.
Yeah. No, I don't get too, I think my big thing is I do enjoy the intimacy of a lens. So I do prefer your faster lenses. I think that's the way my kind of default's always gone.
Yeah. If you could pick your next project, and dream project, dream director to work with, if you could just rub that magic lamp and
it would definitely be Chris Nolan. I think Chris Nolan is genius. I think his work, every time, it's kind of faultless. From seeing Memento and being blown away by Memento, a long time ago, through all his films, and each one kind of everybody talks about it. It's a film that everybody's like, did you see Inception? Did you see Dark Knight? And I think he has a kind of a very real interpretation of how he story tells. And I think I love that feeling of it's real. You completely go with him for the 2 hours of the movie, and I think that's genius. And so yeah, if you could wave your magic wand, there'd be a Chris Nolan feature.
So you'd have no problem shooting mixed format film.
Mixed format, IMAX. Yep. I know the cameraman Joe Russell. He takes the 3D. He would take an IMAX on his shoulder happily.
Good stuff. I was gonna ask you about cameras specifically. And I think, moving forward, like you said, you'd love the sensors to be bigger. But, one of the trade-offs that we've always had to fight with, is that getting the camera to be the right size, getting it to be ergonomic and fit in a certain way. And that's always been a little bit of the tricky part.
Yeah. It is. And I think it's you want the camera to be, for an operator, to be able to hold it and move it around. And I think that's when the operators start getting you the shots. And I think I've been spoiled by such great operators. The Joe Russell, Sean Seeley's and Brian Nordham's. They can do it with an Alexa 65. And that's a heavy camera. So it's when you don't have the luxury of these guys that you see some operators struggle. And I think that's where we can see. And I think it's this balance. At the end of the day, it's experience of being able to balance the camera. Because if you can balance it, you can chuck it around a bit more. And I think the frustration is when some operators don't balance and you can see everything lopsided and everything. So I think that's the benefit of the smaller cameras. You don't get into that kind of problem.
Yeah. I mean, going back to your conversation about camera movement and the tools that have come out for camera movement just in the last, couple of years, it's been astounding.
Yeah, stabilize.
Yeah. Is there one that you're just like, I love using this, I go to this all the time?
I think if you could wave your magic wand and get me a Stabilize in my next project, that's the one I want to use, because it kind of does, the frustration of some gimbals where you can see the forward movement,
right?
Without naming names. And there's so many rigs have been made to try and get around that. And then you end up going, what's not working? Let's just chuck it on the Steadicam. And I think Stabilize is the first time that they've got a gimbal that can do that can go forward. And, as proved by Roger Deakins in 1917, which is just, a piece of art,
Yeah, incredible.
So I think that's going forward. I think we're going to have great fun with gimbals. I think we're going to have great fun with the smaller cameras, a lot of the, like the Fuji GFX 100, like the big sensor stills cameras, I think I'm going to have fun with putting, bigger lenses on them just for those trick shots.
Yeah.
So, you can record something that's tiny and get it in places, that you would never be able to get, your traditional camera.
Yeah. And we're coming up on an hour already. This always flies by for me. I'm always wow, okay. But what I do like is we have a really great audience of young filmmakers that join us every week, and I like for them to. They always are asking any tips of the trade, any inspiration you can share. What's your words of wisdom as we?
I think my words of wisdom are always be true to yourself. Don't try and second guess people. I think people will hire you for what you do. They know you're the guy to do X, Y, and Z. Don't make a committee version of it, I think is probably the best way to describe it, because you'll never be able to sort of keep people happy. I think if you second guess and try and make things, you end up with a kind of compromise, which ends up very general and average. And the shows that kind of hit above their, punch above their weight are not the average kind of, made by the committee. It's, it's with the strong showrunners, it's with brilliant directors, it's with the support of production. And as a DP, it's your job to support the people with the vision. So they've hired you, so stick to your vision and don't sway. And I think that's the way for DPs going forward. Stick to your style and be honest to yourself, and it will come across on the camera.
Oh, that's great. Well, I can see the light is slowly going down, and
But I was going to say, is there any quick questions or?
There's one in regards to Umbrella Academy that came in, and it's just about they just love the look of the show, and they're just curious. What was the prep like to get to that? What was it that?
Yeah, it was what you were saying. It was phenomenal close collaboration with the production designer, the showrunner, to make sure that we were making the world that everybody wanted, and that kind of giving all the reference, giving all the visual cues, so that everybody knows what they're going to get. And I think that's my favorite part of the job. Is world building. I think is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, great. Well, I really appreciate it, Neville. It was great to see you. Great to catch up.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. It's a real honor for me. So you just need to make a 5x4.
It's on the list here. We'll be going back to Munich with that. Well, look forward to catching up soon, and look forward to the next season of Umbrella Academy. It's going to be exciting.
Season 3. All right.
Thank you, Neville.
Cheers.
And thank you to everybody that tuned in today. You can go to our website and check out all of these episodes. They'll be available on airyrental.com. And you can follow us on youtube.com/Airy Rental Group as well. All right. And until next time, everyone, cheers.